Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Friday special on PTE World. I'm your host, Khalid. But today, the topic in discussion is one that we have been talking about since years and decades. It's the Kashmir issue. But lately, we see that there has been an escalation from the Indian side. If we just see the statistics since 1989 to date, thousands and thousands have been murdered, massacred, women raped, children orphaned, women widowed. Apart from that, just if you talk about the month of June this year, 33 people have been martyred, 236 people have been injured, 7 just alone in Kupwara, 3 women have been martyred, 4 children have been martyred. And even if we cite one example, that of Faizan Ahmed Khan, who was an activist who was martyred, his body was brought to the hospital and was seen by his father, who was himself a doctor, who declared him as dead. This is a continued spate of violence that is being perpetrated by the Indian side, and they are not stopping at anything. Lately, you also saw that the BJP stopped its coalition with the PDP in Kashmir and has imposed a central rule in that country. Now, the elections are to be held in 2019 in India. How is that going to play out? What is the Modi strategy? Is he going to continue his Hindutva strategy and continue the deployment of troops? We know that 700,000 Indian troops are deployed in Kashmir that are continuing their unabated spate of violence, whether it be through pellet guns, whether it be through injuries, through rapes, through massacres, through disappearances of people. We saw Shujaat Bukhari, the journalist that was martyred. That happened after 10 years. A journalist was martyred in Indian-held Kashmir. This is something that is going on. The United Nations Human Rights Commission takes out a report that is rejected by India because it blames, in the most of the part, India for all of that is happening in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. What's going to happen? Pakistan does whatever it can through different means, through moral, diplomatic, political means, to support this Kashmir region, to support the Kashmiris' right to self-determination, something that has been denied to them since independence. What is going to be the future? Is 2019 going to be a decisive year for them, or is it going to get worse for them? Let's talk and discuss about this and more with our 3 guests that are here with us. Let me introduce them to you. On my very right is Dr. Riffat Hussain. You are a Foreign Office expert. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Next to him is Zamir Akram Saab. You're a former ambassador and also an expert in foreign affairs. Thank you very much, Zamir Saab, to have joined us. And of course, last but not the least is Altaf Hussain. Wani Saab, you are a senior APHC leader. Wani Saab, it's a pleasure to have you because you can give a rather specific overview on what is happening in occupied Kashmir. Let's begin with you, Dr. Riffat Saab. In the beginning of all of this little introduction that I gave on my show, talked about all that has been happening since 1989, especially a movement that has gained momentum since Burhan Wani's martyrdom in July 2016. And not to forget, this Sunday is the anniversary of Burhan Wani's martyrdom, and they have in advance started to put all the Kashmiri leaders under detention, under house arrest. How do you foresee this whole movement, especially in the context of the Indian elections that are going to be held in 2019?
Well, 2 points, quick points. All these statistics that you have mentioned about the rising graph of Indian repression of the Kashmiris' just struggle underscore the reality that the situation in Kashmir is really grim. And the very imposition of the center or the governor's rule there indicates that the democratic process, or whatever they call it, the democratic process, that has been put on hold. And at the same time, there is now a growing concern in the international community about the implications of this continued violence by the Indian state against the Kashmiris, and that has been now for the first time ever. If there was the fact that Pakistanis, as the next door country, and the people who are directly affected by the violence in Kashmir had known all along, has now been for the first time documented, and it has been documented in a very methodical way, even though the Indian government has rejected the report, but that underscores, so which means that the international community is now concerned that unless and until dialogue process started between India and Pakistan, and the conditions are created for the beginning of that dialogue process. The situation in Kashmir is not going to improve. And the very fact that the Indian chief has recognized that despite their best efforts to suppress the Kashmiris,
Bipin Rawat.
Bipin, means that the Indian security forces have not succeeded in trying to suppress the Kashmiris or marginalize their voice. And now we know that the Kashmir issue is going to remain a burning issue. The critical question is that as the India moves toward the elections, they might try to give little bit of space to the Kashmiris, which I very strongly doubt, but there is a possibility.
Well, that is very interesting. Little bit of space, Zamir, Akram sir. Do you feel that little bit of space will be given to Kashmiris in the light of the 2019 elections, because the BJP wants more power in these elections as well, and Modi, who has kind of started to be aggressively promoting his campaign for the next year's elections, will he give some space to Kashmir and the Kashmiri people?
I doubt it. I think that Modi will play the so-called Pakistan interference in Kashmir card to generate support from his power base, which is basically the right-wing conservative Hindu Hindutva groups, and they are very nationalistic, and so he will play that nationalistic card by saying that Kashmir is a test case and that this is how Pakistan is interfering, and so he will use Kashmir as an electoral issue to gain support. That's what my reading is, because it seems that he is losing some support in the country. I still think that he will manage to win the election, but it will not be by easing the repression that has been unleashed on the Kashmiri people. But the fact on the ground is, and it is recognized by none other than the Indian Army chief himself, who should know, because his troops are the ones that are repressing.
And there's a huge number of troops deployed in Kashmir.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's the largest concentration of troops anywhere in the world. So, this is the reality which even the Indian Army now recognizes. But I don't think that this will translate into Mr. Modi changing his political gimmickry by continuing this repression in Kashmir.
All right, Wani sahab, speaking of gimmickry by the Modi government, we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of months, and we see no respite for the Kashmiri people. I just noted and gave the statistics of just the month of June alone. How does it all going to play out in your point of view from somebody who has more information on what's actually going on in Indian occupied Kashmir?
You see, the June, as you discussed, the day the Human Rights High Commissioner released this report on Kashmir on June 14th, soon after 2 hours of releasing of this report, when the noted journalist Shujat Bukhari tweeted about this report that this has first ever historic report on Kashmir and welcomed this report, he was gunned down in Srinagar. And before that, on June 2nd, when a Srinagar boy who was moved over by a vehicle, army vehicle in Srinagar, Shujat tweeted as I am being told for the last 24 hours by the Indians why I posted the picture of a Srinagar boy, but the Indians have to learn why the people of Kashmir, the young people of Kashmir, have lost the fear of death in Kashmir. So then the Indian media and all that Indian politicians, they were after it, and Shujat was finally gunned down. And then the report which Human Rights Commissioner issued, it speaks volumes of the atrocities India has been committing, though this report covers only the incidents from July 2016 onwards.
Of course, we will continue on all those atrocities that are being perpetrated by India, by the Indian troops, by the Indian government in Kashmir. But after a short break, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us on PTV World. Welcome back. You're watching the Friday special. I'm your host, Khalid, and we're discussing the Kashmir issue. Wani Saab, just before the break, you were telling us about Shujat Bukhari and his martyrdom and the tweet that he made before that. Despite the tweets, despite whatever he made, told the world as well, he was martyred. The Indian troops did not care for that. A martyrdom of a journalist that happens in Indian-occupied Kashmir by the so-called biggest democracy of the world. No reaction from the world?
Yeah, there was definitely there was reaction on the Shujat Bukhari's murder all over the world. The journalists fraternity and human rights fraternity around the globe condemned this murder of Shujat Bukhari. But the fact remains that India has, it's not first time India has done so. India has been doing for last, at least for last 3 decades in Kashmir. 30 journalists in Kashmir were killed in last 30 years in Kashmir, and noted journalists in Kashmir were killed in different incidents, and also the human rights defenders. I was talking about soon after this report, we were expecting that some good will prevail in Government of India. Government of India will see it name and shame on international
But
fora.
nothing happened.
But in contradict, what Government of India did, they rejected the report on one hand. On the other hand, intensified their militarized oppression in Kashmir. They intensified in all nooks and corners of the Kashmir Valley. As you said, the 30 people were killed in different incidents. Not only they were killed mercilessly, the innocents, they are being targeted. You talked about Faizan, 14-year-old boy who was a bystander in a protest.
And he was declared dead by his own father in the hospital.
And his father declared him dead. This is this incident, and also the children, they are being directly targeted by the Indians, the rape. But one thing we must note that the Indian army chief, reacting on this report, he said that the world knows our human rights record in Kashmir, and people of Kashmir know. Yes, people of Kashmir know. They have killed over 100,000 people in Kashmir. They have enforced to be disappeared over 10,000 people in Kashmir. They have extrajudicially killed thousands of people in Kashmir. They have carried out 18 massacres in Kashmir. This was all what Kashmiris knew. But now the world also knows, after this report, that what India has been doing in Kashmir.
The world knows, Wani Saab, but does the world react in the way it should?
You see, at this time, you see, the thing is that I think our experts, they know more about it, how international diplomacy works, why they do. Unfortunately, this time, this is all about the people have their own interests. They talk of their own interests unless and until this whole thing happens in their own countries. The way the Indian radicalization, Hindu radicalization is happening in India, which has in last, I think, 4 years, 48 people were lynched by Hindu mob, radicalized Hindus. 48 people were lynched out in India. But world has not has turned a blind eye to all this. But this report, I think, this report has spotlighted the fault lines the India has in Kashmir, and I think the time has come. Now the human rights fraternity all over the world has recognized this, and I think the world capitalists will also have to think over it and help in establishing a commission of inquiry.
All right.
What has been happening in Kashmir?
All right.
Commission of inquiry.
Commission of inquiry, Dr. Riffat Saab. This is not the first time that Pakistan has talked about an inquiry commission. It has talked time and again about United Nations Human Rights Commission to go and make fact-finding reports, for delegations to go and see. We have taken from our diplomats to different areas in our part of Kashmir, and they have seen the situation of the Kashmiri people in our side, and they have said that whatever India is saying is not right. But whatever India is doing in Indian-occupied Kashmir, despite the report that has come out last month, we don't see the reaction. As Wani Saab points out, is it because it is a local issue that the foreigners are not responding to it, and until and unless it escalates to other regions, that then they will react? Why is the whole world, why are the major powers turning a blind eye to this massacre, to this rape, to this violence in Indian-occupied Kashmir, despite the report coming out?
That is true. But we have to understand that the international community has double standards. They judge India by one standard, and they judge other countries, including Pakistan, by another. So we have to accept that reality. But having said that, it's very, very important that the issue of Kashmir has to be resolved through a process of non-violent dialogue, for which certain conditions have to be met. The violence has to come to an end. The Indian state repression must end. All the Kashmiri leaders, including the ones who have recently been arrested, they have to be released, and the Indian draconian laws have to be annulled as part of the process which will create conditions for a conducive dialogue. But I am afraid that under the existing conditions, under the existing level of the Indian military forces being present, you mentioned the 700,000, and the state repression, the level playing field will not be created, and the Indians, even if they want to engage with the dialogue with the Kashmiri leadership, that dialogue will remain suspended. So the important thing is that India must end its repression against the Kashmiris and give Kashmiri the leaders a chance to speak with one voice. But I think that Indians are being self-destructive, because the Indian Army Chief has recognized that force alone will not resolve the problem. So in other words, what he has left unsaid is that dialogue is the only way out. But for the dialogue to take place, there is a level playing field that has to be created.
All right, very interesting. Level playing field. Do you feel, Zamir Sahab, that the level playing field can be given by the Modi government in the wake of the statement of Bipin Rawat?
Not in the immediate future, as unfortunately. I don't see that happening from his side, because in the response to your earlier question, as I said, all this is now being perceived by Modi in terms of the upcoming elections next year.
It's all about politics.
And unfortunately, I think he sees any kind of flexibility that he demonstrates in this regard will be misinterpreted from his perspective as a sign of weakness. So I don't see him showing any kind of flexibility. But in spite of that, I think there is a lot that needs to be done by us. I would say that.
When you say by us, what do you mean?
By us, I mean by Pakistan. Because
isn't enough being done by Pakistan?
Well, we can do a lot more, because I mean, I have been a critic of the policy whereby we have sought a dialogue with India without really specifying and without really insisting that unless there is an end to the repression in Kashmir, there can be no dialogue. So the Indians know and think, at least they think, that Pakistan will talk to us irrespective of what we are doing in Kashmir, which shouldn't be the case, at least in my my view. The other thing is that we have a golden opportunity in terms of this report, which is an unprecedented report by a functionary of the United Nations, and he's the High Commissioner for Human Rights, so he's the last word on this issue. We need to take this report and we need to project it in a more proactive manner across in the world, and especially in the Western capitals, which have close relations with India. And I agree with Dr. Riffat that these countries have double standards. Anything like this happening to Christians or Jews anywhere in the world would have brought about a storm.
Had a much more forceful impact and reaction from the West.
It would have evoked a storm from these countries, in the Western countries. So, but in any case, I think there are people, there are still people in these countries, apart from their governments, who are responsible, who are concerned about these kind of issues, and then we should outreach to them. We should outreach their parliaments, we should outreach to their media, to their think tanks, to their academics, to their civil society in a much more proactive manner than we have done so far. We also need to use the opportunities available within the UN system. I mean, one of the things that I have written about as well is that we should unilaterally allow the UN to send a team to Azad Kashmir, because we have nothing to hide.
Exactly.
But our reaction, as the report says, that we will let you come if the Indians let you come, I think this was a mistake. We should let them come in. We have nothing to hide, as I said, but it will.
But we have taken our diplomats in Azad Kashmir, sir,
Absolutely,
and
I
we've
mean-
shown them the situation there.
Exactly. I mean, I've been to Azad Kashmir so many times, and I don't see anything that we have to be ashamed about. And so there is that aspect of it. Then the United Nations Secretary General has offered to play a role. Well, if the Indians are not willing to let him play such a role, at least we should invite him to do something. We should invite him to come here, highlight the Kashmir. This is the whole thing, is to keep this issue alive in the international agenda. Eventually, people will come to realize that once they know the truth. See, a lot of people don't read a report of the UN Human Rights Council. So you need to go beyond that. This is a very technical report, it's a very factual report, but everybody doesn't read all these things. So we have to take the elements out of this and share it with the international community and bring them to understand what's really going on. And I'm sure that
you're
this
saying
will
we
be
need to be
eventually-
more aggressive as far
Absolutely,
as
that's
the
what I
foreign
mean. When I
powers are
was saying
concerned.
proactive, but you can say we should be more aggressive. And I think we have not been that aggressive.
All right, all right. Wani Saab, in the wake of all the statements that have been emanated, even by the Indian Army Chief, by the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, who says that he will open an investigation, do you feel that the Indian reaction is going to be swift, or the Indian reaction is just going to be as it has been in the past? And especially, sir, in the last 2 years, we have seen an escalation of the militant movement by those people who are trying to talk for the rights of the Kashmiri people, especially after the martyrdom of Burhan Wani. Do you feel that momentum is going to escalate if there is no reaction from the Indian side, despite this report coming out, despite all the reactions by the leaders that has come out?
You see, the reaction we saw after Burhan Wani's martyrdom in Kashmir, the way the moment flourished, it went to the new heights and it caught the international attention. And because of that, this report came out. It was all because the Indians, until that, they negated each and everything and said, with this a law and order problem, we are going to deal with it and all, and choked all the civilian spaces, put all the leaders in the in jails. And then also they tried to change another thing which was in their kitty, to change the demographics of Kashmir, to abrogate the Article 370 and 35 of the Constitution of India. And that was the reaction we saw after Burhan Wani's martyrdom, the way the things went up. And after India choked all civilian space, it left no space for the people of Kashmir, for the youth of Kashmir to go for again to the to their violent mode, to have their attacks on Indian Army. And after that, we saw how Indian Army destroyed the things. But this report, after this report, again we saw the same reaction from the Indian Army, and I'm afraid this violence will escalate in Kashmir. This will escalate if the goodwill doesn't prevail in India, if Indians prevail the same thing. What they have done after this report, as you talked in the intro, they disbanded the government in Kashmir,
Exactly.
they imposed the
coalition
governors from Kashmir.
ended.
And there is also one thing which they dreamed of, which the BJP dreamed of in Kashmir, to go for 44 plus in Kashmir to form a government. And now they are going to buy the MLAs from the PDP and other parties to establish a government. Soon after the Amarnath Yatra, they have said, after the end of the Amarnath Yatra, a new government will be installed in Kashmir that will be led by someone who will be supported by BJP or BJP itself. And thereby they will again try to go, and in these days there will be a Supreme Court hearing on Article 358, and there will be no state government to represent that in the Supreme Court. And they try all these things to constitutionally to abrogate all whatever the autonomy was there, and this will have a backlash in Kashmir. As soon as it happens, you will see more violence, you will see more people coming on streets, you will see the Indians will face the whole population of Kashmir over there. Despite all their military repression, they are not going to suppress the people's resistance in Kashmir.
All right. Dr. Riffat, if this movement is not going to be repressed and India is in no mood to call for talks despite the calls that have been made, despite the reports that have come in. You've got the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the Kashmir Public Safety Act that are in place there. People are being arrested time and again. Even now, Wani's martyrdom anniversary is coming the day after tomorrow, and they have already put all the Kashmiri leaders under house arrest. Under all of these conditions, and the whole world watching as well, and India claiming itself to be the biggest democracy, isn't it kind of negating itself as being a democratic power, the biggest democracy of the world, when it itself is not adhering to the democratic norms?
Well, India has done that for a very long period of time, right from the beginning of the independence days of India and Pakistan for the last 70 years. There have been several critiques internally by, I am reminded of Sumantra Bose's book, which was published in the mid-70s, in which he had talked about the denial of justice and human rights and right to self-determination of the Kashmiris. So these things have been documented. But the most important thing is that what kind of implications does this continued Indian repression in Kashmir has for the future of Indian democracy? I see a great threat to the functioning of the Indian political system, because the way the Hindutva philosophy is being implemented, the way they are trying to suppress the voice of the Kashmiri people for their inalienable right to self-determination, and so many other things that are happening. So Indian democracy is moving toward the right, and in a way it reminds me of the European democracy in the 30s, when you had the collapse of the liberal democracy and the rise of the fascism movement. So India's future as a democratic country will not be secure unless and until they give the Kashmiris their right to self-determination.
That is a very important point, because Zamir Saab, you see elections are coming next year in India, and India claiming itself to be that biggest democracy. Don't you feel that the people in India understand what's happening in Kashmir, or are they themselves also turning a blind eye towards what's happening there?
I think the majority of the people are turning they're not turning a blind eye, but they have bought into this canard, this lie, that the uprising in Kashmir is only taking place because of Pakistani subversion and Pakistani interference. They believe this, a majority of the people actually believe this, and they also believe that Kashmir is a part of India and there can be no compromise on the status of Kashmir, which is an integral part.
But isn't there a sizable amount of Muslims present in India?
Exactly.
Can't
The
they kind of
Muslims,
understand
again,
the situation?
look, I lived in India for many years when I was posted to our High Commission there. And the Indian Muslims are in a very bad state, as you know, majority of them. Those who are well off are, of course, part of the mainstream and to protect their own interests. And the rest, the majority of the Muslims are in a very depressed economic condition. They hardly have a voice. So I don't see how the Indian Muslims are going to do anything. If there's anyone that has a role in a positive sense in India, and that's the liberal communities, which are small. And Riffat mentioned Sumanta Bose, there's Arundhati Roy, and there's so many others. There are people with a good conscience about what's happening.
Sane mind, who talks
And
sense.
they are talking about finding a solution to the Kashmir issue. I think there are some people even in the opposition, even in the Congress party, that have at least said that, look, this thing can't continue endlessly. And this thing has gone on for nearly more than 7 decades. And we are just talking about since Wani's martyrdom in 2016. But I mean, this goes back all the way to the partition and to the occupation of Kashmir by the Indians. So this has such a long history, which has time and again demonstrated to the Indians that all their efforts, use of force, offering peace deals, dialogues, for a solution within the Indian Union is not acceptable to the Kashmiri people. So they have to think out of that straitjacket. They have to think of a solution outside that. And that can only come about through a dialogue that involves the Kashmiris, but it also involves Pakistan. because we are a party to this.
That
dispute.
is true.
So until they come to that realization, we cannot think of any real progress in finding a solution. We did come close when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. We did have beginnings of finding
But
a
wasn't
solution.
that the same party, by the way, Vajpayee?
Well, there was a big
what
difference.
happened between him and Modi?
Well, there's a big difference between Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Modi. I mean, we were wrong. If there was anyone who thought when Modi was elected that this man is going to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Vajpayee, is absolutely wrong. With this man, I'm sorry to use the word, but he has blood on his hands. He is responsible for the massacre of hundreds of thousands of Muslims in the state of Gujarat. He has no qualms about that. So to expect him to treat the Kashmiris and recognize their rights, I think it's just not going to be possible. It's just not going to happen. And I agree with Riffat. I wrote one of my articles came out yesterday, in which I have mentioned the growing role of fascism in different parts of the world, including India, because this party, which is the BJP, which is informed and follows in the follows the ideology of Hindutva that the RSS has been propagating. Even Indian authors like I forget his name right now, but he wrote an article after Modi was elected, in which he pointed out that this party, the BJP, is a Nazi, pro-Nazi fascist party because of its roots with the RSS.
And of course, speaking of RSS, Wani Saab, RSS has recently been declared as an organization, I mean, an extremist organization, only recently, Wani Saab. Despite the fact that this is a party that has existed since long. It has been the party behind all the bloody massacres that have happened in India. Now, despite the fact that the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh has been considered as an extremist party, do you think there's going to be a reaction from the world over about what they are perpetrating in India, about what is happening in Kashmir?
You see, the two debacles which India faced most recently was one, the US State Department declaring Rashtriya Sevak Sangh and the Bajrang Dal as the militant outfits, the political organization with militant outfits. They were not just declared as terrorist organizations. They were that the political organizations having, or religious organizations having militant outfits. This was one, and the other was the report on Kashmir, the UN report on Kashmir. The two things. But we see in India now, this is the ruling elite in India. The BJP is the child of RSS. All these cadres which are ruling the India this time, the majority state in UP, the Yogi, he is another man who was responsible for demolition of Babri Masjid and then starting the reconversion, homecoming movement in India and all that. And he's also the one that Ram Madhav and Amit Shah. All these four persons who are at this, and Ajit Doval, who is the National Security Advisor, these people are known for their anti-Muslim sentiments, and the way they have played the role. This was, we see that as how the politics is played. When the Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he was not allowed to visa of UK or US. But again, when he became the Prime Minister of India, he was warmly welcomed in both the places. So that is economics. That's the way they played economics. They have altered all those human values on the economics. The West has, at this time, West or US, you may say, they have altered all those human values for their economic interests. But as Dr. Riffat was telling you, that the way the politics in India is going on, the way things are shaping up in India, it will itself cause damage to India. The Indian, what India has been selling to the international community this far, this is a democratic state, this is a secular state. The secular the very secular fabric of India is in danger this time. You see, not only Muslims in India, as Ambassador was telling you, what is the condition of Muslims. In 2012, we had a Sachar committee report, late Justice Sachar had a report, and which says how pathetic the conditions of Indian Muslims are there. It's not only the Indian Muslims, the Christians in India, the people, the Dalits in India, the way they are being treated in India, it's a huge question mark now on the Indian democracy. And in these last 4 years, all these things have escalated in India. The minorities in India, they are being victimized throughout.
But Wani Sahab, what I want to ask you, despite them being victimized since the last 4 years, everything is going on hunky-dory in India. Nobody protests as they should. Being a democracy, there should be groups coming out protesting against what is happening, but nobody does that. Why is that so?
It's not like that. Perhaps we are not watching it. In India, you see, most recently, the way Modi conquered the India in 2014, but the way he faced the election challenge in Gujarat, it speaks volumes of things.
And he won it by a very slim majority.
So
that we should not forget.
That means people in India know about it. But we have to market it. Unfortunately, what we have been telling, India is working very hard on our fault lines, on the fault lines which we are. But we are not working on the Indian fault lines to make West know, to people in West know
But Wani
what
sir,
are the fault
but Wani
lines,
sir,
how the Hinduta,
yes.
how the Hindutva is working in India, how the Hindu extremists are treating the minorities in India. It's that we have to do. We have to keep make people know about all this. And I think at the public perception in West can be changed.
All right, but Wani sir, one question that I'll ask you, and then to both my guests as well. You talk about changing the perception from the Pakistani side. That we have been doing, but Zamir Sahab says we need to be more pro, we need to be a bit more aggressive in that approach. But aren't there sane people in India who want democracy to prevail? Isn't Congress part of that? Aren't other pro-democracy parties present in India who are also watching all this Hindutva conversion happening since the last 4 years? Can't they raise their hue and cry? I don't see that happening as much as it should.
See, the way the Congress failed in India on the governance front, they had their own problems on the governance front, and the rise of Modi was the development and economic structure of which he created in Gujarat. After that, but having said that, how the Indian public will react, that's their own problem. The way they will deal with that, they will. I think the opposition parties in India, on one thing, they are very much united against whatever the bashing against Pakistan or for Kashmir, as Ambassador said, that they have been telling to the people.
I mean, Pakistan bashing is fine for all of India and all of democratic forces, but when it comes to their own issues, they're not talking about it.
Because of Pakistan, what Kashmiris are, the people fighting in Kashmir, they are the foreign terrorists and all that. They are convincing to the, on that front, nobody in India, none of the political parties in India can afford that. Even the realization is there, the ex-foreign minister of India, who was a BJP foreign minister in Vajpayee's regime, he himself conceived it when he went to the Kashmir in 2016, and after that he submitted a report, and lately he resigned from BJP. So the sand walls are there, the people are coming out, but not in that figure, but we, the people, as soon as this will escalate, I think the goodwill in Indian public, they will all, the perception will be changed.
All right, Dr. Riffat, concerning the fact that India is a democracy, I want your point of view and Dr. Zamir's point of view as well. On that, the fact that there are other democratic forces in India and they are seeing this conversion. There are people who want democracy to prevail in that country as well, and who are seeing whatever is happening since the last 4 years, are not raising that much of a hue and cry. Either they are afraid of what is going to happen to them by these extremist parties, as they have shown to other Muslims. We've seen the incidents that have happened of people lynching them, of killing people, even on eating beef, on carrying beef. Do you feel a movement can come in India before the 2019 elections that can bring sanity, or are you not optimistic?
But I'm not sure that, by next year you will have movement of this kind taking shape, which is large enough, which is potent enough, and that can force a change in terms of securing India's democratic future, which I think has been imperiled or has been threatened. But I see hopeful signs. On the one hand, you have the Indian state narrative, which right now it seems to be the popular way of thinking about India's future, including repression and ignoring all the other human rights abuses. But there is a there is a potential movement, there is a civil society narrative in which they are watching with great concern, with great trepidation as to what kind of a damage the return of Modi's power in 2019 elections can do to the future of democracy. So I am not sure that in the short time we will have the launching of this movement, but for the sake of India's democratic future, I think that is the inevitable course for the civil society discourse to take place. And once the civil society takes charge of its own destiny, and I'm pretty sure that there are Human Rights Watch organizations within India who have written extensively about the violations in Kashmir, but their discourse somehow does not find the kind of media play that we have in, for example, in Pakistan.
Or is diluted by whatever Modi's government is trying to project nationwide through the media channels. We don't see it on India media channels as well. The way the Kashmir issue should be propagated is not being propagated. Zamir Akram Saab, Pakistan, you said, needs to be more proactive, needs to be more aggressive in its approach when it deals with the major powers as far as telling them about what's happening in India is concerned. But seeing the slim majority that Modi's got in Gujarat recently in the elections, do you think that will play a role also considering the fact that he's propagating a totally negative agenda in Kashmir, the way he's continuing with the unabated violence and terror in Kashmir? Do you think that will have an impact on these elections as well? I want to continue my debate with what I had with Wani Saab as well as Dr. Riffat Saab. Do you think that impact will come in 2019 or it will need another 5 years?
Well, for the record, I remembered the name of the author to whom I was referring. His name is Pankaj Misra, and he's a very well-known Indian journalist and academic. So, and he's the one who compared the BJP and RSS to the Nazi party and to fascism. I'm not optimistic about this kind of change taking place in India towards more liberal values and towards more liberal approach in terms of dealing with the issue of Kashmir in particular. I mean, there may be forces that would like to see the BJP defeated by the Congress or by someone else. The reason I'm not so optimistic is because from the Congress party, which is the next largest party, really does not have any leadership at the moment. So they lack any charismatic leader who can galvanize support.
So there's not a proper opposition to Modi's party
So the
at the
opposition
moment.
is very weak, number one. Number two, these liberal forces in India are very small. They are not of the numbers that can bring about a change in the electoral direction. So I'm not that optimistic of that happening. But the important thing is that even if there is a change, will that translate into a more into an approach by the next Indian government which seeks a solution to the Kashmir issue? I doubt it.
All right.
Because even when the Congress has been in power, we have not really seen any real effort, any tangible effort to find a solution
to the
involving the Kashmiri people.
And that also involves Pakistan.
And involving Pakistan.
Right.
So I really am not optimistic. What can happen in the final thing, what can happen is that once international pressure builds up and the Indians become sensitive to their image abroad, then yes, then they will have to think of ways to find a solution of this thing.
All right, all right. Well, we can all hope and pray for a solution to this issue to come up, especially in the wake of all that has been happening in the last few years.
And the amount we have to act as well.
Exactly, the amount of violence, the amount of aggression, the amount of deaths, the amount of rapes that have been occurring. Gentlemen, Dr. Riffat Hussain, Zamir Akram Saab, Wani Saab, thank you so very much to have joined us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kashmir issue is an ongoing issue. It has been present since the establishment of Pakistan and India. It is a cause that needs to be projected more aggressively and by all parties involved, and India, claiming itself to be a democracy, needs to not put a blind eye to this issue. They need to understand the plight of the Kashmiri people and find a reasonable solution to this issue. And as Vipin Rawat, their own Indian chief, has said, talks are the only way forward. So let the Kashmiri people talk, let the Kashmiri people have their plebiscite. Farhan Wani's martyrdom anniversary is coming on Sunday. I just hope peace prevails on that day. Umar Khalid, but you farewell from this Friday special and wishing for a sane India and wishing for sanity in India and wishing for a solution to that Kashmir cause. Allah Hafiz.